Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So this is a pretty epic video in my opinion. If you guys follow me on social media, you saw a post I made well, by the time you see this video, it's going to be a couple weeks ago, but there was an empty inline fabrication mount on our bench down here. And if we've got a mount, that probably means, that's right, today is new press day. And we completely got hooked up. And, you know, I think people are probably guessing, is it blue? Is it red? Is it green? Well, let's check out the montage and let's jump into it. All right, guys, as you can see, RCBS hooked us up with the mother load. I'm just gonna kind of go over some of this stuff. We won't even get to all this in this video, and maybe not even in this series. We'll see. We're gonna get to it all, but it's gonna be a minute here. But we've got the RCBS Pro Chucker 7 progressive press, which I was super excited about because, as you guys know, my progressive experience goes all the way from basically here, manual indexing, basic loader, to somewhat not basic loader, manual index, to auto index, to case feed, to bullet feeder, to automation, you know, like all over the place. And I have always been curious about the Pro Chucker 5 and 7. This is the 7, so it's really cool. You get 7 stations. And you know, just a full disclosure, I know guys that are watching this, a lot of you guys are newer loaders and you're not sure what press you want to get. And my advice when it comes to progressive presses is, if you're a tinkerer and you have some mechanical abilities, progressive presses they're a lot of fun and they really crank out the ammo, but they all have their idiosyncrasies. I don't care if you're buying the basic, you know, like Lee auto turret all the way up to, you know, a Mark 7 automation. I don't even know what their new press is right now. As you guys know, we got 1100 CP2000s, 750s, yada, yada, yada. But they all have quirks. So you're gonna have to take that in consideration. If you've never reloaded before, could you jump into a progressive? Yeah, absolutely. But if you're not super mechanically inclined, I would always steer you away, learn the basics on like the single stage, like that RCBS Rock Chucker Supreme. That is a beast of a press, and in my opinion, that's best in the game when it comes to single stage. And like anything else, it's my opinion. It's not because RCBS sponsored it. It's because I've loved that press. I've had several of them, and you know, it's always my go-to. But also we've got some bullet feed tubes, a bullet feeder. We're gonna work into that. We've got a power punch decapping assembly. We've got some cleaning peripherals. But like I said, RCBS totally hooked us up. And those guys out there, when they say, you know, I love the fact they say they're precision engineered. And I cannot wait to jump into this and see what it's all about. Also, thank you to Inline Fabrication. Dan always does me right on my press mounts and stuff. We get a lot from them. And there's no better way to mount your press to the bench, in my opinion. Go check out them as well. But let's jump into an unboxing. Let's take a look at what comes in this Pro Chucker 7. It's like Christmas. I'm excited. So let's jump into that. So we've got the contents out of the box. It was very well packaged. Didn't want to bore you guys with a lot of unboxing and stuff. But the first thing I want to talk about is a very detailed set of instructions. So I will, for the purpose of this video, we will go through the instructions and set this press up accordingly. But very nice instruction manual. Looks like we've got some primer tubes here for our automatic primer system. Handle, this is the pretty much standard RCBS. This has a little bit different finish on than the Rock Chucker, but you know, the ball mounts, those are really nice. We've got a linkage style drum powder measure, which I'm really curious about this one. You know, like on some of the other presses, they've got that slide bar. The drum powder measures are pretty much bulletproof, so curious to see how well this works on the press. We're getting acro bin. That looks like the drum there for the powder measure. Some mounting flanges, but we're going to have our press on the inline fabrication mount. And then here is the tool head made out of aluminum. Looks like it's got some good webbing there. It's going to give it some rigidity. And what's cool, 7 stations. The more stations, the better. Several other peripherals. And of course, I'm going to move you guys over here 1 second. And of course is the Pro Chucker 7. So just looking at the internals, you guys know I'm very familiar with auto indexing presses. This would be where your shell plate's going to mount. And looks like it's got a mechanical ratcheting style mechanism. So we're just going to start putting it together and see how it does. But yeah, pretty cool. So let's go ahead and start getting things mounted up and put together. Then we'll take a look at it. All right, so we're going to get this press mounted on our Inline Fabrication Ultra Mount. And if you mount this on the bench or use the RCBS base plate, it's coming with this acro bin bracket that basically mounts right on your bench. Now we are using the Ultra Mount from Inline Fab. So I have got their bin bracket system here. It's going to mount underneath the press. It also has some die holders there, which is really cool. This will allow you to put 2 acro bins on here. Now mounting this for this particular press, we want to basically get it flush with the front of the press. As you can see, there's another 4 holes here. This fits many other presses. But for this application, we have some adjustability. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab the press. Thing's heavy. It is heavy. And Inline Fabrication provides you all the hardware, which is really cool. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of hand start on the right side there. Actually, there's a lock washer that goes on there too. And one thing about RCBS presses, that finish, I just absolutely love it. It's not like on some of the other ones, they seem to hold grease and stuff and they get kind of stained up. This is a very glossy finish, and it's that, you know, really cool green and kind of silver hammered metal look. Really awesome. So we're going to lift this up and get our washers in, just like so. And then we're going to try not to pinch our fingers. Make a lot of noise too. And we'll get our nut started on there. Just like that. I will leave things loose because I'm not sure exactly how we're going to have to adjust that. And then we have a bolt that's going to come up underneath on the back side. See if we got enough there. Just barely enough length. So I might have to put a little bit longer bolt in here, but we'll stick it on here for right now. So again, we're just going to kind of hand tight things down because, like I said, I'm not sure. I know I want to kind of get this so it's kind of flush with all the edges of the press and then flush with the Ultra Mount. So we'll go ahead and snug those up just so we get things kind of going there. And we'll get the handle mounted next. So I'm going to pan you guys around and we'll take a look at that. Let's go ahead and mount our handle on there. And you know, one thing I didn't confirm yet was if this press is going to hit my bench. I might have to move my Ultra Mount, so we will learn something here together, guys. But basically, we're just going to thread the handle in. And what looks like we're going to have to take this zip tie off. Let me grab some snips and then we'll get back together. All right, so I went ahead and I snipped that cable off so we could pull the ram down, because we're gonna have to snug that up because I can't get my wrench in there. And one thing I thought was kind of cool, there is a locking pin that goes basically right through your press here, and you can put a lock on it, like if you want to keep your kids from getting fingers pinched, stuff like that. A really neat feature. And one other thing I just noticed, and I will bring you guys down here in a minute. This is really cool. But we're going to go ahead and tighten up our handle. So just a 9/16, just get it snug. And let's make sure, moment of truth, are we going to hit our bench? Nope, we are good. All right, so when I went to tighten this up, I wanted to make sure I got full stroke of the press. And I noticed I had just a little bit of rub on my bench. So instead of taking the Ultra mount and moving it forward, I just notched up my bench, put a little paint on it. I'm not worried about it. These are Harbor Freight benches. But one thing I wanted to show you guys, this is awesome right here. Grease zert. So it has a grease zert, so it's going to make greasing this ram. That's awesome. That's a great feature. Really paying attention to detail. So basically, we're going to keep moving forward, getting this thing put together, and then we're going to do an overview of it once everything's put together, and then we're going to start reloading on it. We're going to do a series on this. We'll probably just pigtail right off the rock chucker, go right into this with some 9mm, maybe use some different dies in this one. So let's just keep putting this press together, and I'm excited. The next thing we're going to do on this side of the press, this is where our primers are going to go in. So we've got to get into our bag of peripherals. I'm going to jump these out here. In this bag here, and we have two different primer pushes, a small and a large. So if we look at them, one is definitely, this way. One is definitely bigger than the other. That's going to be large. That's going to be small. So what we're going to do is we raise the ram up, and we're going to tighten this up from the bottom side here. And I'm going to put you guys overhead view so you can see what we're doing. And then we're going to tighten this up with a 7/16 wrench. With our ram all the way up, we are going to be putting our primer plunger, that's this unit right here. It's going to thread up through the bottom, and there's one threaded hole here, and we're going to thread it up from underneath. Shouldn't be too tricky with my big paws here, but I'm going to thread it, and then we're going to tighten it down. Hopefully you guys can see that poking up right there. So I just got it in hand tight. If I push on it, you can see our primer plunger come up. So I'm going to take my 7/16 and just get it snug. You're not going to have to crank on that. And then if we drop our ram, we can see it come up the bottom. I'll jump you guys down so you can see that. So as you can see, right here's our plunger. And when we push it back and forth, we can see it protrude up and down. So that's what's going to push our primers into place. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to put our primer actuator arm on the side of the press. So it's going to be this package here. So we'll dump the contents out like so. So we've got just some fasteners there. And this arm here looks like those are countersunk. So we can kind of figure that out. I'll grab an Allen key and then we'll jump over and we'll get that put on the press. All right, so we're going to take our actuator arm. You can see there's 4 bolt holes here. So we'll go ahead and get that put in, take our fastener with our Allen key, and we're just going to kind of get them all started there, a few threads. So I will say this press does have quite a bit of assembly involved. So hopefully it's all worth it. Make sure we don't get any of these cross-threaded. There we go. And when it comes to stuff like this, I mean, this arm here it's like a hard plastic. So I wouldn't recommend cranking down on it to crack it. So I'm just gonna kind of use the short side of the Allen key and just kind of finger tight there. I'm not gonna torque on it whatsoever. All right, there we go. All right, the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna put our transfer bar on our slide. And real quick, if we look at these transfer bars, you'll see, and hopefully they show up on camera, you have a 7S and a 7L. The 7 means Pro Chucker 7, and the S means small primers, the L means large primers, and they give you a few extra. So we're gonna take the 7S because that is the small primer. And you notice we have a bar on top and a bar on the side. We want to make sure that the bar is up, and this bar that's horizontal across there needs to go to the back of the slide bar. It's going to fit in there just like that. All right, now we're going to take our primer dispenser and our hardware. And if we look at our primer dispenser, pretty easy. I'm pretty sure our magazine's going to thread onto there. But underneath we have a pin and a hole, and on the shell plate holder we have a corresponding pin hole there and a threaded portion. So we are going to place the pin in the hole very gingerly here, and then we are going to thread on our hardware. We'll tighten that down with a smaller Allen key. I believe it's, you know, I probably should look and see what it is. 8x32, somewhere in there maybe. All right, so then we'll snug that up. And now we're gonna take our guide, our bar guide here. You see it's got one hole in it. So we'll grab another 8x32, and it's got a lip on it here. So that's going to go up against the slide bar. Just give it some extra support. So we'll go ahead and loosely put that on by hand for right now. All right. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to grab our safety shield or magazine and then go ahead and thread it on like so. This is starting to look familiar. And just hand tight. And again, we're kind of keeping this loose right now. We may need to adjust that once we start running the press. So once we get it dialed in, we'll snug that down. Okay, the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna put our primer tube inside the safety shield. And we have two here. As you can see, one's smaller and one's got a larger diameter. We are doing small primers. So we're gonna unscrew our knurled cap, and we're gonna place the aluminum tube down into, now you can feel it's gonna catch at the bottom. You're gonna wanna wiggle it around to get about a 1/4 inch out of the top. Very familiar. Then we're going to thread this down just by hand. Just hand tight's all we're going to do. Now I've went ahead and lowered the shell plate holder down, and now we're going to install our spring that's going to make this primer bar move back and forth and kind of give it some pressure against this guide rod. But very familiar looking springs. So we're going to go ahead and get them over top of the pin like so, and then it's going to wrap around and grab the pin on the rear. And you might need a pick or something just to make life a little easier, but I was able to get it there. So now we'll go ahead and raise it up and down, maybe check for function. Okay, let's see if our primer slide bar is moving. You see the spring retracting that in there. Looks to be functioning. All right, moving on here, we're going to go ahead and this is where we're going to install the shell plate. We're doing 9mm, so this is number 16. Make sure you order that. It's this little guy right here. It's a number 16 for the Pro Chucker 7, part number 88959, and you'll need to order that for whatever caliber you're going to do. So what we're going to do now is we're going to raise up our shell plate, and I'm going to use the lock pin here that's provided. This is also what locks the press up. And we're going to take our detent spring, and we have towards the back of the press, there's a square hole. That detent spring is going to fit in there. And then we're going to put our ball bearing right there on top. So let's go ahead and get our shell plate installed. Real quick, it's going to go on in this orientation. You see you have a pocket here. There's going to be a washer that goes there. And on the back side with this ball bearing, you can see these slots here, and there's a round portion there at the front of the slot. We want the ball bearing to sit in that round portion when we install this. So that's kind of going to give us that positive engagement that we're used to. So once we put the shell plate into place, we're going to go ahead and put our washer on, and then the nylon lock nut that comes in the kit. So what we're going to want to do now is we're going to take a 3/16 Allen wrench, just like so, because we're going to want to keep this from spinning, and we're going to take a 5/8 wrench, and we're going to go ahead and snug this up. All right, so now I've got it pretty much tight. I'm going to go ahead and tighten that until I feel it bottom out. Right there, it bottomed out. So now what I want to do is, as I can tell, I cannot move that shell plate. So I'm going to back it off. Make sure you hold your hex key, hold that shoulder bolt into place, because it will want to loosen up on you. We don't want that to happen. So I'm going to back it off just a little bit, quarter of a turn, and I can move the shell plate freely. And I don't have much play, so I'm going to play with this a little bit. Try to mitigate as much free play as I can, making sure I can spin the shell plate by hand. That's really good right there. And the shell plate moves freely. So now we're going to test it. We're going to pull our lock pin out of the way so we can index our shell plate. And that moves freely, and I can move it very easily with my thumb. And I really have virtually no free play in that shell plate. That's pretty impressive, actually, considering progressives inherently have some big flex right there. That feels pretty good. So now at this point, we have our shell plate installed. We're going to kind of check for some function here, making sure the shell plate indexes smoothly, which it is. And also, we want to make sure our primer slide bar is moving in and out, and we don't have any interference. And at this point, everything feels, I mean, in my opinion, I've never used one of these presses, but it feels pretty good. I'm not getting any binding or anything like that. So I'm going to call this step done. So let's keep moving forward here. So now we're going to set up our case eject spring, and it's held in place. It's this wire right here with a small set screw. So we're going to get this loosened up a little bit. Now this is going to take some adjustment, but looking at the instructions, we're going to kind of line it up with the kind of the tangent of this radius right here. And we need to put about a 30 thousandths gap between the spring and the shell plate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to eyeball this 30 thousandths. I don't have any shims down here. So I'm just going to get it up off the shell plate so it's not rubbing. And then I'm going to snug up. Just going to snug up this set screw. And this might be something that we have to do some more tweaking on later. but that's going to get us in the ballpark. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I don't have anything rubbing on there. I'm going to spin the shell plate around, and I've got clearance, so we're going to call that good for now. So again, we might have to adjust this again later. Now that we got our case eject spring installed, we're going to put our discharge chute on. So we're going to take our discharge chute and hardware. We're going to raise our ram all the way to the top because there's a threaded hole up underneath the shell plate, and it's going to go just like this. And I got to find the right hole here. All right, so we'll get this started by hand, just like so. And the orientation, we might have to adjust. So what I'm going to do is I've been working with my parts in this acro bin provided. So I'm going to go ahead and lower this down. Make sure that I'm kind of lined up there with my detent spring. So again, we might have to adjust this to get the cases to shoot down in here, but I didn't want to cause any interference. So I'm going to go ahead and take an Allen key, get that snugged up, and then we're going to move on to putting our die plate on. Okay, so now we have our discharge chute and our eject spring. And because I always just want to check, I want to check some function. Let's just see if we got to make any adjustments. I went ahead and put a case in. Let's just walk it around. We're just making sure everything's running smoothly. Let's see how the case ejects. So it looks like my pin might need a little bit of adjustment because it's kind of pulling the case out of the shell plate, but we'll see. So it does eject. I am probably going to set this back in here, adjust the spring so it just touches the case, just kisses it, so it's not putting it out of the shell plate. So I'm going to go ahead and make that adjustment now, just because I can't leave it alone. I want it to be perfect the first time around. When we put our die plate together, we're going to have 3 set screws or lugs that's going to go on the top of the press here. So I'm going to go ahead and get those started by hand. Just get them started. And again, there's 3 positions there. So we get those threaded in. And we look on top of the press. Bear with me here. We will see there's a lock position. Very small pieces. Very big fingers. There we go. So we got those started. You see there's an unlock and a lock. So if we take our die plate, again, 7 stations, we notice there's these detents in the die plate. So what we're going to do is align the star up so it drops down into the head of the press. And then we're going to move it to our lock position. So that's basically locks it into place. We'll put our lugs down to kind of keep it secure, which I'm really interested in because, you know, inherently on a lot of these presses, you're going to get some shell plate or die plate movement. This should mitigate that to some degree. And then to remove it, like if you got multiple tool heads or multiple die plates, you just easily remove it like that. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten these lugs down so we kind of secure everything. And we're pretty much done with the core of the press, with the exception of the powder measure, which we'll probably get into next. But let's go ahead and get these snugged up and we'll jump into the next step. So when we're tightening these lugs down, it's important to know that the detents line up with the head of these lugs. So it's going to kind of self-center. So as I tighten this down, you're going to see that die plate kind of move and center up. And I'm not putting these down super tight. I'm just basically getting them to touch and then no more than like 1/8 of a turn. Just to kind of lock it in position. It's not going to come loose. So again, just letting it touch the die plate, letting everything center up. And that's it. All right, so we have the press pretty much put together. With the exception of the powder measure, that'll be in the next video. But a couple things I want to talk about, specifically using this inline fabrication setup. The primer tube, this is the discharge for the primers. On the back side of the press that you have to install, I didn't cover it in the installation because I had to do a slight modification. I'll pan you guys around and show you what I did to the primer tube. As far as installation to the press, not a big deal. Pretty much followed the directions. I just had to make a slight modification because I didn't mount this to my bench. I'm using an inline fabrication mount. And if you guys are using this, you're going to kind of get into a situation, but I'm going to show you guys that here in a second. So basically, I'm really happy with the shell plate. There's hardly any deflection there. Everything is indexing as it should. Our cases are ejecting. So you're going to have to spend some time. This isn't just as simple as, you know, putting it in place, tightening it down, and it works. You're going to have to kind of tinker with that a little bit. The old paper clip, and I love this because it's on a lot of presses. You'll have to make a slight adjustment for that. That's covered in your instructions very easily. But everything that you see is pretty much ready to go. I do have the acro bends from Inline Fabrication along with their bend dividers. Thanks, Dan, for sending those out. Super awesome setup. I'm really excited to get the powder measure set up. The big thing here, and I'm just methodical, I want to make sure everything's going and functioning as it should be in each step. So I made sure that I had minimal deflection, everything turned by hand. Our case eject, our discharge chute, this Paul, or I shouldn't say Paul, that's a wrong press, but this index finger here, no adjustment, that was set up from the factory. The one thing I will note, when we jump around to the primer chute on the back side here, you do have to dismount the press, get it up to get up under there and come up through the shell plate, and there's a set screw here on the side. I did double check the alignment on the die plate on top. Everything looks good there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump you guys around, show you the modification I made to the primer chute or the primer tube on the back. And then other than that, this thing's ready to roll. We'll start setting some dies up after we get the powder measure on. And then I'll give you my final thoughts, and we'll kind of jump into kind of a precursor to the next video. So the thing I wanted to show you guys about the discharge tube that goes up into the press, mounts to the shell plate, is it does go up and down with the press, which is fine. We'll mount an acro bend on the back. I've already checked it out. It's going to shoot the primers in there, no issue. But that tube was straight. And what it does is it does hit on the inline fabrication mount. So I put about a 30-degree bend in that with a tube bender, and it works just fine. So that's how we had to modify this slightly to work with the inline fabrication mount. If you're mounting this right to the bench, you won't have any issues whatsoever. All right, guys, that's going to wrap this. This is the basic installation or assembly of the RCBS Pro Chucker 7. And how awesome is this green bench turning out? It's completely different that you guys have seen on the channel in the past. So this for me is completely a fun project because new setup, new mechanics, the whole 9 yards. In the next video, we're going to start the assembly of this Uniflow powder measure, which I am awesome. I'm like so excited about this one because it's a completely different linkage mechanism than I'm used to. And I do know that the Uniflow powder measure setup, the drum style powder measures are super accurate. So I'm really curious to see how it performs. So we're going to wrap this one up. So again, big thanks to RCBS for giving us the hookup on this Pro Chucker 7. Just a couple notes that we talked about, things that I'm really impressed with so far. The shell plate deflection, the indexing is very smooth. The grease fittings, it's just those little attentions to detail that RCBS has done that I think is going to make this a really nice press to work with. Inline fabrication for the Ultra mount. This bin bracket setup, I'm looking forward to that. And, you know, a couple little idiosyncrasies that I showed you with the primer tube, the discharge tube on the back. And like with any progressive, you're going to have to tinker with it. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you're mechanically inclined and you like tinkering, progressive presses are so much fun. If that isn't your strong suit, I would kind of push you into a single stage or a turret. But this makes reloading so fun because you get the benefit of some some more rounds per hour, the mechanics of it, and it just makes it a pleasure. So I'm looking forward to getting busy with this RCBS Pro Chucker 7. We have a lot more work to do to get the powder measure put on. We've got a new set of RCBS die set that we're going to use, and we'll probably kind of do a mix and match with the RCBS set. I like the Lee factory crimp die, so I'm going to utilize that on here. We also have some other peripherals for the press that we're going to try out. I have a bullet feeder, and we're going to do that, see how that works. And then also have this power punch decap assembly that we're going to retrofit into the RCBS dies. And what that's going to do is give us that spring-loaded power punch to knock those primers out, to make sure they shoot down that discharge tube. But if you guys like this series, please consider subscribing to the channel. You can hit us up on Instagram and Facebook as well. If you want to support us, check out the links in the description. We are on Patreon. I don't post much on there, but some guys, that's an easy way to help us out. There's PayPal links, the whole 9 yards. But if you don't want to spend any money, subscribe, like, share these videos. Helps us out in the algorithm and makes this, it just helps us out, purchasing equipment, things like that. But the more I can do to kind of provide some information to you guys, teach the craft of reloading, that's what I'm really passionate about. And this has been a fun project, getting back on the original bench and doing some cool things. We also have some case cleaning methods from RCBS. We're going to check those out. So stick around. It's going to be a fun ride. Hopefully all winter long, we're going to do some reloading content before we get back into the off-road stuff and other things that we like, camping, things like that. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up. So thanks for listening to me ramble. Thanks for watching the video. And until next time, guys, God bless.